Hello and welcome back to War Mysteries. I'm joined, as always, by Matt.
All right.
And I'm Jay. This week we're talking about one of the most famous pilots of all time. There can be very few people alive today who are not familiar with the name of the Red Baron. Are you familiar with the name of the Red Baron?
Familiar.
He's familiar with the name of the Red Baron. The mere mention of which evokes imagery of his famous red triplane, which is down here, of course.
That's what I think when you mention him.
He was a true embodiment of the Knight of the Sky, perhaps one of the very last incarnations of such, and in subsequent decades would be remembered alongside other pilots such as Erich Hartmann, Ernst Udet, Adolf Galland, and Gerhard Backhorn. The accepted narrative is that the Red Baron was killed on the 21st of April 1918 in a dogfight over the Somme River when a single .303 round won. I can't get this any short. Is thought to have struck him while in pursuit of a Sopwith camel. What is hotly disputed is exactly who it was that fired this fatal shot. In this episode, we investigate the last flight of the Red Baron. So, the Red Baron. Do you know anything about the Red Baron?
He flew the plane there, the red one.
Yeah, a Fokker DR-1 triple wing triplane.
And other planes.
Halberstadt, Albatross.
He flew with a group of lads called the Flying Circus.
Yep. Named because they had very colourful planes. Probably one of the earliest examples of psychological warfare.
Yeah.
If you came across, a squadron of colourful planes in the sky, then you knew what you were in for. They were very skilled pilots.
He got shot, didn't he? Through the heart.
Yeah, he took a round, came through the side of the plane, passed through the sort of back right shoulder area and came out just above his heart.
Killed him.
But no one really knows who exactly it was that fired the shot. So, let's get into it. Red Baron, we know he's dead, obviously. Let's have a go. The very earliest documented use of aerial warfare, in fact, took place in ancient China, though perhaps not quite in the form we might imagine. Manned kites were used for intelligence gathering and communication, and their adoption for both military and civil duties can be traced all the way back to 636 BCE. Powered aircraft, of course, would not make their debut in warfare for another 2,547 years.
Really?
Yeah. So,
long time
ago. You wouldn't have thought perhaps that they would be doing, they'd be doing anything like that back then. But they used to. In fact, they used them as prisons before as well.
What, kites?
Yeah. So they'd make, I guess, bamboo cages, and then attach them to these huge kites that they'd built, and then they'd just push them off a cliff. And obviously the prisoner's caged in there, so they can't get out. But basically, the sentence was, we'll just let nature decide. Brilliant. So if the kite failed, they fell to the ground, and would die. Sometimes they'd be carried out to sea, and eventually the wind would bring them down and they'd drown.
Brilliant.
But yeah, that was practice, common practice.
Right, and what has that got to do with
the
Red Baron?
Okay, so that's where it all started. They didn't just use them for prisoners; they used them for reconnaissance.
Okay.
They'd fly people up on a big rope or whatever, if they could, over a battlefield, and they'd make notes, see what they could see, then bring them back down. Didn't always work. We are talking about 2,500 years ago.
Definitely.
In 1911, Italian piston monoplanes bombarded a Turkish military camp at Ain Zara in Libya, marking the first use of such aircraft during combat. By 1914, military aviation was still very much in its infancy, mainly used as a tool for reconnaissance and artillery spotting. but by 1918, at war's end, would have become a well-established doctrine. World War I was the first large-scale conflict to make widespread use of aircraft in military engagements. The earliest scout aircraft were crude affairs, plywood-constructed boxes equipped with underpowered engines and no armament, designed with little thought for aerodynamic efficiency. But pilots and engineers learned quickly from experiences over the battlefields in the early days, a time when spotting balloons or zeppelins were the primary tools deployed to determine enemy positions, and in the case of the latter, to conduct bombing raids. The result of this was a continual push for improvement in aircraft technology. Aerial combat initially involved handheld firearms, but it was quickly determined that pistols were too weak and rifles too inaccurate to be considered effective. It was only when French pilot Louis Queneau loaded up a Hotchkiss MLE heavy machine gun on a Voisin LA-3 Samson biplane on October 5, 1914, and opened fire on a German Aviatik B-1 reconnaissance plane, completely destroying it in the process, that the true dawning of aerial combat began.
Basically, it all culminated when someone said, you know what, we've got a plane flying around. We can see the enemy airships. Why don't we start shooting at them?
Why not? What I would have done.
It was only when some French pilot called Louis Queneau loaded up a heavy machine gun, French machine gun, onto a Voisin LA-3 Samson biplane, and that was on October 5th, 1914. So it took a while.
So he was the first one that decided.
He was the first guy
to take a machine gun up with him.
Yeah, pretty much.
He thought, this I'm going to take a serious weapon up.
Yeah. So he and the hangar crew basically mounted a gun on the cockpit. He said, "Look, put this on here, and let me have a go." And he went up, opened fire on a German. It was an Aviatik B-1 recon plane, so unarmed. Bit harsh.
Bet he wouldn't know what I did him.
Yeah.
That's if he just had a pistol.
He opened fire with this machine gun and completely destroyed it.
Not fair, really.
Which would mark the dawn of aerial combat.
The advent of dogfighting, or air-to-air engagement between purpose-built combat planes, drew forth in early 1915, when Vickers FB-5 and Airco DH-1 fighters took to the skies above the fronts, tasked with attacking German spotter planes to deny them their crucial battlefield intelligence gathering, and were to meet with resistance in the form of Albatros C-1s and AEG C-1s. The Fokker E-1 Eindecker entered service on July 1st of 1915, and featured a synchronised Parabellum NG-14 machine gun that could fire through the propeller arc without striking the blades. This gave the German air service a distinct advantage over the previously unchallenged Allied fighters.
It meant that they could basically aim their plane and what it is they're firing at.
Well, yes, I think that always amazed me. It still amazes me now that you can get the guns to fire through the propeller as it's. I think that's fantastic. What good maths
Clever.
Must be there.
But obviously, there'd be more advancements to that.
I'd rather not know about that as a pilot. I'd rather be up there and it happening, and then suddenly realise, oh wow, yeah, that's happening. Instead, I wouldn't want to be told about that because it sounds a bit risky. But
well,
otherwise,
there would have been plenty of accidents. Forward firing a machine gun, that was a big problem until they invented the synchronised gear. Of course, the guns were jamming a lot anyway, so they wouldn't always work.
By early 1918, the evolution of fighter aircraft was such that a new breed of pilot had emerged, the Ace. Ace was a moniker applied to those pilots who had 5 confirmed kills in aerial combat, and the predominant ace of World War I was one Manfred von Richthofen. In time, he would become known as the Red Baron.
You know what an ace is?
Is it a pilot who got a certain amount of kills, the amount of planes they've shot down? That's how you gauge if they're an ace or not.
Yeah, 5 aerial victories. They have to be confirmed. If an enemy plane lands behind enemy lines, you can't confirm it. Because you don't know whether the plane was recovered or the pilot was killed.
This is true.
So, has to be observed, and there usually has to be a witness as well, which led to some contention because some pilots would both claim the same kill, which means they'd get half each. Well, at least the British tracked in halves and quarters. Everyone else just made it up, really, especially Russian. No offence. So how many kills did the Red Baron have? You know? It's not on there.
20, 30.
80.
Fair
80 confirmed. They reckon that if they had counted up all of the planes that he shot down or damaged to the point where they had to land, it would probably be over 130 in the First World War.
Quite impressive.
Very, very, very talented pilot. You can't dip it in Ribena. So now we know a little bit about the background, about the era that this was all going on. Let's find out about the man himself.
Manfred Albert Freyr von Richthofen served as a cavalry officer on both the eastern and western fronts during the early months of the war, seeing action in Russia, France and Belgium. But with the development of trench warfare, his unit was dissolved due to the redundancy of traditional mounted warfare.
So they didn't need to use mounted riders anymore, which is pretty obvious because they'd also invented something called the machine gun.
Horses don't like those.
Horses can't outrun bullets, so they stopped using those. He was moved to a support unit, acting as a telephone operator and dispatch runner.
Ooh, bet
So-
he didn't like that.
Yeah, wasn't a fan,
Hacked off.
which is probably an understatement. So he's sitting there at a phone, taking calls and running messages. He's still going to be out there in the mud and the shit and the filth. Subsequently, he applied for a transfer to the Imperial German Army Air Service, or, let me see if I can get this right, Die Fliegertruppen des Deutschen Kaiserreiche. I'm not saying that again. And his request was granted.
So he must have been quite young at this point.
Yeah, he would have been, when he joined up, he would have been 21.
From June to August 1915, Richthofen served as an observer over the military front, and then transferred to a flying unit in Belgium, where he learned to fly solo. Over the next year leading up to October of 1916, he flew in various roles, including with a bomber squadron, but would eventually end up with Jasta II, one of Germany's first fighter squadrons. Over the next 2 years he would distinguish himself, flying with Jasta 11 as flight leader, and later with Jägergeschwader 1, better known as the Flying Circus, because of the bright colours of their aircraft and the tents that they would set up on makeshift airfields. He was credited with 80 kills in total, making him the highest scoring ace pilot of the First World War. He flew a variety of aircraft, including the Halberstadt D2, the Albatros D2, and the Fokker DR-1, the red triplane for which he became famous. His final days on the front came to an end on 21st of April, 1918.
Well, even after he got killed, nobody went on to beat him.
Nope. The next highest was 76 or 75, and that was a French pilot.
Okay.
I can't remember his name.
La Bouillon La Foy.
He flew a variety of aircraft, including the Halberstadt D2, the Albatros D2, which smashed, and the DR-1, the one he's famous for, the red one.
But that's what I kind of associate with him, but he didn't fly that all the time, did he?
No, in fact, he flew that not exclusively until the last couple of months of the war, because it had flaws that they hadn't resolved. So, it wasn't long to the end of the war. But if you think about it, with everything else that he did, he was only flying for a year and a half as a combat pilot. So, now we know about the era, we know about the man. Let's talk about his final engagement.
Richthofen and his squadron were flying over the Morlancourt Ridge, near the Somme River. Richthofen was attempting to engage a Sopwith camel, piloted by Lieutenant Wilfred May at very low altitude, and upon opening fire, the camel backed away from an attack it had made on Wolfram von Richthofen, the Red Baron's cousin. The pursuit of May led the aircraft across the Somme, at which point another Canadian pilot, Captain Arthur Brown, also flying a Sopwith camel, noticed and attempted to intervene. He had to dive at a steep angle at a very high speed, and then pull up to avoid crashing into the ground. Richthofen spotted this attack and banked away, then resumed his attack on May's camel. The combatants flew over an area that was occupied by Australian infantry and gunnery forces.
And is that when people just started going, pop, pop, and having a pop at Richthofen?
Yeah.
Good.
Anyway.
Mystery solved.
In the next few moments, what is believed to be a .303 round struck the side of Richthofen's aircraft, and he appeared to disengage from May. Shortly after, the triplane began to lose height, eventually making a hard landing in a field near Vaux-sur-Somme, close to an area defended by Australian infantry.
They managed to land it, although it did end up on its nose.
Okay.
When he stopped.
But he got down.
Yeah, he managed to land
down.
it reasonably intact. Didn't lose any wings or anything, but the undercarriage was damaged in the end.
So more intact than the other model we had here that you knocked off.
Yeah.
Considerably more intact.
Richthofen's Fokker DR-1 was not badly damaged by the landing, though it had come to a stop on its nose. He was discovered near death in the cockpit, having suffered an extremely severe gunshot wound to the chest. He died shortly after the plane came to a stop, surrounded by Australian soldiers.
So there's different reports about who found him and what was going on. Apparently he said kaput. That was his last word. It doesn't really translate very well. It either means broken or knackered, damaged, destroyed, ended. If that was his last word, he probably meant it as in, I think I'm about to die, given that I can't breathe and my heart isn't beating.
One thing I did read is the... what are you doing? Are you trying to factor me in here?
Right.
Factors.
There is one small picture of him, look, as he's coming down.
Is what that is taken as he's finally coming down from being...
Yep.
Let's show it to the viewers. Yeah, put it up.
We'll put picture up.
Have you covered me with it, or you?
I don't know. I'm not editing.
When you do, can you cover you?
Okay. I'll move it. There you go.
What a nice picture it is as well. So we know in that picture there he's struggling to breathe.
But yeah, probably.
And he's probably
Bleeding to death.
going to die.
Well, he is going to die.
Okay.
Because he did die.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's where he got buried. So we know he was shot down. You can analyse a few things. There's some existing evidence, there's some testimony. But there are essentially 4 individuals who have the best case for being the person who actually shot him down and killed him.
I bet there's an Australian in there.
That would be a good bet. The odds on that would be too good, really. So we'll start off with the one that most people have heard of, which is Arthur Roy Brown.
Never heard of him.
Arthur Roy Brown was a Canadian ace, credited with 10 aerial victories during the war. On April 21st, Brown was on patrol over the Somme, when his wing came under attack from Jagdstaffel 11. Flying with the patrol that day was Wilfred May, who had been instructed to stay clear of the fight and observe. But during the engagement, Brown noticed that May had initiated an attack on an enemy fighter, who, it would transpire, was Wolfram von Richthofen, the cousin of the Red Baron, and he would subsequently become entangled in the main dogfight. It was at this point that May was intercepted by the Red Baron, and the Red Baron was intercepted by Brown. During the initial pursuit, Brown dived at high speed and high angle of attack to engage the Red Baron, and while doing so let off a burst of machine gun fire, but was forced to pull up very hard shortly after to avoid crashing into the ground. This meant that he temporarily lost sight of both aircraft. It is not known for certain that Brown's attack inflicted damage of any kind to either the Baron or his aircraft. The pursuit continued, and a few moments later, Richthofen's plane began a sharp but reasonably controlled descent. Despite no evidence to ascertain the circumstances, Brown was nonetheless credited with the kill by the RAF. The official citation stated the following: "For conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty. While leading 6 scouts, he attacked a formation of 20 hostile scouts. Seeing that one of our machines was being attacked, he dived on the hostile, firing all the while. This scout, a Fokker triplane, nosedived and crashed into the ground."
A reasonably twisted version of events.
It's the Disney version.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's not quite what happened, but he received a citation for it. However, whoever it was that shot down the Red Baron was supposed to receive the Victoria Cross, and he didn't get it.
Shame.
So,
Why didn't he get it?
I don't know. Right. But it's, that could be another indicator. So that's Arthur Brown. Short and sweet. Dived down, lost sight of the combat for a few seconds, and then it was pretty much all over.
All over.
So the next case is that of Robert Buie.
Robert Buie enlisted in the Australian Army in October of 1916 and sailed to France in January the following year. On the morning of April 21st, 1918, Buie was in the trenches of the Somme with the 53rd Battery of the 14th Brigade. He was manning a Lewis gun that had been retrofitted with a makeshift telescopic sight. Above him and his unit, the Flying Circus were engaging with Allied scout fighters. Buie spotted an engagement, 2 planes, a Sopwith Camel pursued by a Fokker triplane, readied his weapon and took aim, waiting for the triplane to enter effective range. He noted that periodically, the triplane was discharging its machine gun in bursts. As the combatants drew close enough for his Lewis gun to be effective, he opened fire, along with another soldier further down the trenches, and noticed the triplane bank hard to the left to avoid the incoming rounds. This is notable, since the bullet that caused Richthofen's fatal wound is believed to have entered the cockpit from the right-hand side of the fuselage at an ascending angle, which would be relatively consistent with a hard left turn immediately before the round hit, and one fired from a position lower than the aircraft. Buie claimed to have struck the hostile plane at 40 yards distant, though this was confirmed only by Buie and a small number of his fellow soldiers in the trench. The pursuing triplane levelled off, ceased fire, and began to lose altitude, subsequently passing overhead and making a hard landing in a nearby field. Buie did not know who the pilot was until he was later told.
So he might have shot him.
He may have done.
He might have done.
He didn't know who the pilot was in the plane.
Just keen. And he was having it large to do some damage.
Yeah,
Right.
He's basically opened fire on it.
So it could have been either of those 2 lads.
It could have been. Buie didn't receive any recognition or a decoration, despite being recommended for the Meritorious Service Medal.
Is that an Australian thing?
It's a British Empire thing. British Army.
Commonwealth.
Yeah, Commonwealth Army. So he didn't receive any citation or anything at all.
That's a shame.
So that's Buie. Now his mate, further down the trenches, was Snowy Evans.
William John Evans was another member of the 53rd Battery of the 14th Brigade, Royal Australian Artillery, present in the trenches at the Somme, deployed to the same area as Robert Buie. Evans was also equipped with a Lewis gun, and much like Buie, opened fire on the approaching triplane from the trenches, claiming to strike the aircraft during a banking turn. Evans was situated further down the trench line than Buie, and therefore attacked from a different position, one which seems to have offered a more suitable field of fire. His description of events then follows very much the same course as that of his fellow soldier. The plane flew overhead and came to a rest on its nose in a nearby field.
So Snowy says, hang on a minute, it was me that drilled him out of the sky. So he's not happy with Peter, the other guy who's not Peter.
Robert Buie.
Robert Buie.
Well, yeah. He claimed to strike the plane while it was banking. His description of events follows very much the same of Robert Buie's.
Brilliant.
So he's essentially the same case, just further down the trenches, and therefore in a somewhat better position.
Okay.
One that offered a more suitable field of fire. Not the ideal angle, but a better one.
Okay, so it's more likely that it was this geezer, Snowy. Do we know much about Snowy?
Not really.
Did he have a steady hand?
He became a drifter, and he died childless in 1925.
What mean like a surfer? He's a vagrant.
Yeah. So
That is a shame.
he died on the streets, despite potentially being the guy that killed the Red Baron. So, the last case that we've got to look at, and really the most plausible,
Is
it's not UFOs.
Elvis?
It's not Elvis.
Is it Elvis?
It's not Elvis.
No.
Where have we got Elvis from?
I read just a rumour that Elvis turned up in World War One.
Any more information than that?
Whatever.
Thank you very much. The last case study that we've got is that of Cedric Popkin.
Cedric Bassett Popkin enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces in May of 1916. By late April of 1918, he was serving as a sergeant with the 4th Australian Division, who were stationed in the Somme Valley. He was a gunner, tasked with anti-aircraft duties, attached to the 24th Machine Gun Company. On the 21st of April, his unit was positioned near the Morlancourt Ridge, and observed the interception of May by Richthofen, and the subsequent engagement by Brown. Popkin was armed with a heavier Vickers machine gun, which, importantly, had a larger maximum range and a far greater effective range, and was also a more experienced gunner. When he saw the approaching aircraft, he decided to engage, as they were flying very low and, he judged, well within optimal range of his machine gun. As Lewis gun fire erupted from the trenches, Popkin himself opened fire on the pursuing triplane, which had begun banking to the left over the Morlancourt Ridge, to avoid other incoming rounds. It is at this point that Popkin believes that he hit the aircraft a number of times on its right-hand side, which correlates to the area in which the fatal round struck Richthofen.
I want a slice of this.
Pretty much.
I've got a better gun. I've been doing it for longer. I'm better. I want this kill. I'm going to end World War One by killing von Richthofen.
He probably didn't know that it was von Richthofen.
Well, how could you not know? It's a bloody bright red plane. He did it.
Okay, well, we're going to find out. Or we're going to try to find out.
No, I know he did.
He was also the only machine gunner to have actually fired at Richthofen's aircraft from the right-hand side, and from a distance sufficient to have allowed for persistent, accurate, and concentrated fire. All these factors meant that his attack would have followed the most logical trajectory to have inflicted the fatal shot.
How many of them are you going to eat?
A whole packet.
Oh, okay, all right.
Peter. No, Pop-Tart.
Cider popcorn or whatever you think his name is.
Cecil.
Cedric.
Whatever.
Popkin. Cedric Popkin.
He
Makes
did it.
sense. Makes sense.
Makes sense, doesn't
It
it?
does make sense.
Or Brown in the aircraft.
Why do you say that?
Well, because he's in a plane, isn't he? He's behind him. He's doing. He's doing the game.
But the bullet went through the right-hand side of the plane, upwards.
Bounced.
I mean, it's possible, but it's unlikely.
I think then, if I have to put my money where my mouth is, which is here, I think it is Pop-Tart, Cecil, that did it.
That's our conclusion. All right. Pop-Tart. How are you having so much trouble with his name?
Because it's a stupid name.
Given that May was pursued by the Red Baron across the Allied lines, directly towards the entrenched soldiers, one would be forgiven for assuming that the Australian gunners Buie and Evans had the easiest shot at the triplane. However, at closer range, while a Lewis gun might be considered more accurate, the sudden high-speed banking turn undertaken by the plane would have been tricky to keep a bead on, while from a distance and with a sweeping shot, plus a weapon that was designed for sustained long-range fire, Popkin had the undisputed optimum position and equipment to claim the kill. Brown, during his daring dive attack, probably had a good chance to score a hit, but he was only able to fire his machine guns for a very short time before needing to pull up, and in the time required to bring his Sopwith Camel to bear once again, Richthofen was most likely already fatally wounded from Popkin's ground fire. Brown saved May's life with his decision to engage, however, and so his actions are still noteworthy and courageous.
Yeah, I guess that's nice, isn't it? He was
Well, he did a good thing, didn't he?
He was being a nice person.
He looked after his wingman, which is what he was supposed to do. That's what the Red Baron was doing for his cousin. That's what it was all about.
I would certainly rather that than be in the trenches, where it must have been shit.
You know, there wasn't any glamour in trench warfare. You just kind of lived in the mud. But when you looked up and saw these planes flying overhead,
Heroes.
they were held in a higher regard.
So ultimately, then, what about a legacy? I've got no drink left.
Killed in action at the age of 25, Manfred von Richthofen lived a short life. He was, however, credited with more aerial combat victories than any other during the First World War, and despite his younger age, his reputation nonetheless preceded him. His burial was conducted with respect and dignity in a graveyard close to where he ultimately met his end, a field near the Bray-Corby Road, close to Vaux-sur-Somme. A few years before he passed away in the 1960s, Cedric Popkin remarked, "I'm fairly certain that my machine gun fire caused the Red Baron to crash, but as to pinpointing without doubt the man who fired the fatal shot, the controversy would never be resolved." In an age where military aviation was still assuredly in its infancy, known as the Knights of the Sky and soaring high above the battlefield, pilots were held in high regard. The concept of the ace pilot, a legacy of those early days, is not one that was destined to last. As war machines advanced in complexity and capability throughout the 20th century, direct aerial engagement saw a rapid decline with the passing of the decades, made redundant by the rise of strategic missile technologies and advancements in remote warfare. The lessons learned from the First World War paved the way for innovations and developments that would make themselves known to the world just over 30 years later, particularly in Germany. World War II would consequently see thousands of pilots achieve ace status, which came as no surprise given the widespread reliance on aircraft. During the Korean War in the early 1950s, that number would decline enormously, with a disputed maximum of 73 ace pilots. And by the time the Vietnam conflict had come to a close, there were just 22. In all likelihood, this trend will continue as time passes, and aircraft are relied upon less and less for their frontline combat value. There will be no more aces of the magnitude seen during the First and Second World Wars. The time of the Knights of the Sky has come and gone. As for those who it was that finally brought the Red Baron down, it is unlikely to be ever known for certain.
So anyway, that's that. That's the Red Baron.
It was a good one, wasn't it?
Yeah, short and sweet. Bit of a smaller one this week.
Bit mysterious. But good. I think he was a lucky lad. He was a young pilot. You know, he started out working on the phones or whatever he did before that, on the horses.
Yeah.
I like to think that if he was still alive, he'd probably be a fan of war mysteries. But he's not.
No. Shot down. Dead.
So that's this week's War Mysteries. Thank you for checking out.
Oh, YouTube has stopped.
YouTube has stopped operating for the time being.
Oh, you've subscribed.
I subscribed. So thanks to me for subscribing to our channel and contributing to the effort.
You've subscribed. Brilliant. Great. Why don't you just skew the
And
statistics?
I've also got the notification bell on.
Starting to wonder if all these accounts now are just you in different names. So that's that. That's the Red Baron. That's how he was brought down, and potentially who might have done him in. Quite a sad story, really, given how successful he was. But you got to remember, he technically shot down 80 aircraft and maybe more. So he probably killed a few guys himself. You know, live by the sword, die by the sword. So let us know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching our episode and sticking with us. It's been a tough year, but we're ploughing through.
We're ploughing.
We're ploughing.
Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Be good if you did.
Let us know if there's anything particular mysteries that you want us to look into down below. What are you doing? Join us for our next episode. Obviously, if you've not seen episode 1 of our World War I series, go back to our channel. It's over there. The Mystery of the Zabrina. Very good episode. If you want to send us a message or get in touch with us, feel free to do so through whatever means you want to. Send a comment, send us a message, contact us on Instagram. So yeah, it's goodbye from me, goodbye from him. He has got hands. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching. What did you think, Red Baron?
Enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it.
Really enjoyed it. I love being backstage. Do you know what I mean?
Alright, I'm going to go and put that plane back together now. The one that got knackered.
Yeah.